Yeah, hey, Bene. Good morning, my relatives. This is Mark Charles. It is Tuesday, February 13th. Sitting here with my second cup of coffee, and I just wanted to jump online, say good morning, and talk about a few things that are going on in our world. But before I begin, let me just start as I always start by acknowledging I'm speaking to you from Piscataway lands. Let me honor the Piscataway as the host people of the land where I'm living. And I want to thank the Piscataway for their stewardship of these lands. So there's a lot going on right now, and I'm gonna hit a few of the highlights, but not a lot of them because there's a lot going on. The Supreme Court the Trump has appealed to the Supreme Court after he was had a loss in the federal district court, which concluded he did not have a broad immunity because he was president and he has to stand trial. And so he's immediately appealed to the Supreme Court. And that is, we're waiting to hear, well, the nation's waiting to hear to see what happens with that. He's said some very outlandish things about our alliances in NATO and even just our role as a nation in the globe. But I don't want to get into that. Trump is narcissists create problems that only they can solve. And they put themselves at the center of not only their universe, but everyone else's universe. And they create problems that only they can solve. And it just makes a very chaotic and even stressful living environment, which is exactly what Trump is doing with our nation. He is creating problems that he is positioned himself as he's the only one who can solve these problems, and this is a very unhealthy pattern that's going on, and I just don't want to talk about it at the moment. So we'll do a second cup of coffee and talk about Donald Trump at some point, but at the moment we're just going to leave him screaming in his corner and allowing the media to amplify him the way they do so they can sell their advertising. But we're going to try to have a more nuanced and adult conversation in other parts of the globe right now. So let's talk about a few other things and put some of the craziness of U.S. politics aside for the moment. I do want to talk a little bit about microplastics. If you remember a few months ago, and I'll share this link later, not a few months ago, but a couple of weeks ago, on January 18th, I did a second cup of coffee, and I spoke about microplastics and kind of the impact that was having on our environment. And I want to come back and visit that because I was looking through my news sites the other day, and I came across this article that I want to share with you. I see George and Steve are on. Thank you, my relatives, for joining today. It's great to see you on here. But let me share this link with you. This is in my chat. We'll put it on here. It's from the LA Times, and it's regarding LA Times has been kind of trying to lead nationally on the use of one-use plastics or single-use plastics. They passed years ago a ban on single-use plastics in grocery stores. And a study came out just recently, and this article ran in the LA Times titled, "California's War on Plastic Bags Use Seems to Have Backfired, and Lawmakers are Trying Again." And what they found is that by weight, the amount of plastics that was being dumped since they passed this ban on single-use plastic bags has actually increased. And the article was laying out why that was happening. And there was one point where they said the problem, it turns out, was a section of the law that allowed grocery stores and large retailers to provide thicker, heavier weight plastic bags to customers for the price of a dime. And so the law basically said if you allow your customers to buy thicker bags, then that can be reused, then you can use those bags in your stores. And so a lot of stores did that, not just in California, but around the country. And yet people are not reusing those bags, they're dumping them. And so now, instead of a very thin bag going into the waste, the landfills, now there's much thicker bags going into the landfills. And that's one of the things they've concluded is accounting for the increase in plastic dumping that's been happening in California. And the article actually points out that there were a few companies, when they were writing the original law, there were a few companies in California that made these plastic bags. And so they lobbied to have these bags, a provision for these bags to be included in the law. And the lawmakers agreed to that. And it's actually compounded the problem instead of fixing it. And so now they're trying to pass legislation to say, no, we're getting rid of use of all plastic bags in our stores. That's what they're trying to pass right now. Anyway, I welcome you to read that article. It's a very interesting article. And that article actually references another study by the EPA that happened. And this is on the EPA's website. And I'm going to share that as well for you right here. And just one of the stats they highlighted in here was that more than 35 million tons of plastic were generated in the US in 2018, and only 88.7% of those plastics were recycled. And so basically pointing out we have a very, very long way to go. That article actually gives a lot of tips on how to recycle better and what can be recycled and what can't be recycled and the things we need to pay attention to. And I'm also going to share now this link I did from my second cup of coffee back in January, where I talked about microplastics and some of the harm that's causing to our environment and the ways and the places that that's showing up. But as I thought about this, and as I was just thinking through this, one of the things the LA Times article pointed out is they really are trying to put the burden of this problem on manufacturers, right? The companies that are using these bags, that are providing these bags, that are making these bags, or that are just providing plastics in general. And that's not a bad strategy. I don't disagree that we need to have better corporate citizens in our nation that need to behave more responsibly and sell better products and make better use of our natural resources. I don't disagree whatsoever about that. But I can't as easily control corporations, right? I can't as easily make them change, or we can lobby them, we can protest them, we can boycott them, we can do all the things that as consumers we have the ability to do, but that's going to result in slower change. And it's not something that we can necessarily control ourselves. And so I want to talk just about ways that we as individuals can change our behaviors and change our patterns so that we're using less plastics. And so that even as we fight and demand better accountability and more accountability from our corporate companies, that we actually have integrity because we're saying, yeah, we are doing everything we can in our own households, in our own lives to reduce our plastic bag use. And that's something actually that I've been looking at. I do the bulk of the grocery shopping here in our home. And so because I have a much more flexible schedule, I'm able to get out to the grocery store easier and pick up the groceries. And I've been thinking a lot this year about what else can I do to reduce our family's use of single-use plastics. And again, grocery shopping is one of the things where you get the bulk of single-use plastics, whether it's you buy any kind of chips, they come in a bag. You buy any kind of meat, it comes wrapped in plastic or saran wrap. You buy any kind of vegetables. Usually they provide plastic bags at the store that you can use to put them in. And just like if you come back from a shopping trip and just look through what you brought home, there's a lot of single-use plastic in there. Any sort of condiment that you're going to buy is almost going to come in some kind of single-use plastic container. There's just a lot out there. And so I've been looking at that more closely. Not that I have the magic bullet solution. I don't want to use magic bullet. The magic, I don't, I don't. Not that I have the solution to how to fix this, but I have been more conscientious about what am I purchasing, and am I purchasing things that, even if they can be recycled, a lot of times things don't get recycled well, even if you put them in the recycling bin. And so, just what can I do to reduce my plastic? So one thing we did, very simple, I stopped buying the gallon jug of milk, and instead I'm buying the 2 half gallons that come in a cardboard box. I When I buy vegetables at the grocery store, I put them just directly in my cart, and then I don't put them in a separate plastic bag. When I take them home, I wash them and I make sure they're clean, but I don't take another extra bag from the store. I've been trying to look at, can I buy condiments that come in a glass jar instead of a plastic jar? Or can I buy a larger bottle so I have to buy less than a smaller bottle, which is going to have more plastics around it? What are the things I can do there? Can I buy my meat at the deli counter instead of pre-wrapped in the case? Because usually at the deli counter they'll wrap your meat in paper instead of putting it into a plastic container or a plastic bag. And so, just what are the things that we can do? And obviously, taking reusable bags to the grocery store so that you're not using the plastic bags that are there. Even if it's the larger bags that you purchase for a dime, again, many people don't reuse those. So if you do purchase those bags, make sure you do repurchase them. And also, and kind of in that, I've looked at what else can I do to buy my fruits and vegetables at a farmer's market, or what can I do? One thing I've started doing this year, because of the high environmental cost of red meat, is I've started buying my red meat from farmers markets. And the reason I do that is, I'm supporting local farmers that are raising their their beef more sustainably, but also it's more expensive there. So I'm much more conscientious about what I'm buying, and I buy less of it. And so, instead of waiting for the sale at the local supermarket, I'm trying to buy my meat at the farmer's market, and therefore just buying less meat, because obviously I'm paying a higher price for it. So these are a few things that we're doing in our house. And these are some things I want to encourage you, because, again, it's not just about demanding corporate change. Yes, we need absolutely corporate change, and that's going to have an impact that is going to have global impact. But we also need to change our behavior as consumers. And we have to stop just going for what's the easiest, what's the most convenient, and what's the simplest to get or to purchase or to buy. And we need to start putting more intentionality in, okay, what can we do? And even though it's going to have a much smaller impact, but how can we change our behaviors so that we're buying less of things in reusable plastic? And that's what I want to encourage you in today. I want to encourage all of us to be more intentional. Yes, let's keep fighting and demanding corporate accountability, but let's also do what we can in our own lives and our own households to make sure that we are having as much integrity and using as little as single-use plastic as we possibly can, for the sake of being better stewards and better citizens, better stewards of the environment and better citizens of this globe that we are a part of. So those are a few things I wanted to talk with you about. I also want to talk, and I'm going to bring this up in a minute, I want to talk about this bill that's now going through the Senate and it's gone through the Senate. It's about ready to go through the House. It's a military aid bill for Ukraine, for Gaza, and for parts of the Asia Pacific area. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. But before I do, I don't know, I don't mention this often here, but obviously all of you who are watching, you know that my Second Cup of Coffee streams on either Facebook or on YouTube, and you can join me live if you watch it there. But we also started a podcast, and we call it My Second Cup of Coffee to Go. It's just called My Second Cup of Coffee, but we advertise it as it's My Second Cup of Coffee to Go. And basically, every time after I record one of my second cups of coffee, I just download the audio, and then I upload it directly into a podcast site that gets it out into all of the major podcast websites that you might be using. The two most popular, obviously, are Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And so if you haven't listened to my podcast, or maybe you're like, yeah, I don't always have time to sit in front of a screen or to have it on my phone and have my phone open to be able to listen to it. You can actually download it from my second cup of coffee or from podcast sites. And here is the link to the Apple Podcast site. And I'm going to also share the link to the Spotify podcast site where you can get my second cup of coffee. And then, of course, we have the playlist on my YouTube channel that also has all of the videos from my second cups of coffee that are up there. And so those are just a few other places that you can get access to my second cup of coffee. And then, of course, if you want to get my second cup of coffee and help support the work that I'm doing with this live stream as well as with this podcast, you can subscribe to me on Patreon. And I use Patreon as a way to fund my work and to kind of keep my voice more independent, so I'm not relying on advertising. And every time after I record one of these sessions, I upload both the audio and the video directly to my Patreon, because on YouTube, they also add their own advertising into a lot of my podcast and a lot of my videos. And Patreon, I don't have any advertising there. I don't monetize my advertising here on YouTube, but they still put ads on many of the episodes anyway. So just there's a few other ways that you can get my second cup of coffee. And if you can't join me live, you can obviously join me later at a more convenient time for you. Now, I want to talk for a moment about, and let me go back here. I want to talk for a moment about this Senate bill that is going through the Senate and the House, and it's providing military aid. The Republicans don't know if they want to support it. It's a bipartisan bill, but the extreme Republicans on the far right and the MAGA Republicans who are supporting Donald Trump don't want to give any sort of victory to the Democrats, and they want more funding for immigration control and things like that. And so the Republicans are actually, they're the ones who are holding it up. Slowed it down a bit in the House, and now are holding it up, are in the Senate and now holding it up in the House. But I want to just talk a little bit about, I found this article on AP News. It's titled, "What's Inside the Senate's $95 billion bill to aid Ukraine, Israel, and to counter China." And I was reading through this article, and there was one place, and this is what it said. It said the Senate early on Tuesday passed an emergency spending package that would provide military aid to the Ukraine and Israel. It would replenish U.S. weapon systems and provide food, water, and other humanitarian aid to civilians in Gaza. I'm sorry. You either have to laugh or cry. Right? The hypocrisy of this country is dumbfounding. We're providing military aid for Israel, which is literally killing tens of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza, has displaced more than 2 million people. I think one article I read said there's a quarter of the country that is now homeless and their homes have been destroyed. Like, there's incredible devastation. We're providing aid, military aid to Israel, who is doing this damage. And at the same time, we are providing humanitarian aid to Gaza. We have no integrity whatsoever. We have no, and this isn't even what's being debated, right? This support is bipartisan. What's being debated is whether the Republicans can't decide if they want to support this, but they're still fighting for their immigration control. And so, I mean, the support for Israel, that's the bipartisan part. No one's complaining about that, or at least not many people in the House and Senate. It's the Republicans who, in both the House and the Senate, at different extremes, who are complaining about the lack of immigration control money that's in this bill. But everyone agrees on supporting Israel. And then, so we don't look like complete monsters, they're like, oh yeah, well, maybe we should also provide some food to the people the weapons we're providing to Israel are killing, and the homes they're destroying, and the things that they're doing. And this again just leaves me dumbfounded. The longer this war draws on, the more criminal Israel looks. The more devastation they enact on Gaza and on the Palestinians, the more it just becomes clear what they're doing. And we're supporting that. This war absolutely needs to end. And not for a moment am I justifying what Hamas did when they attacked Israel at the start of this thing. That was absolutely wrong. But the way Israel has responded is very much the same way the United States responds whenever we feel attacked or we feel threatened, which is we don't just attack proportionately. We go way overboard. Anytime we get afraid, I look at what we did in Afghanistan. We were there for 20 years after 9/11. Right? This is what we do. This is the problem when you believe in the myth of your own exceptionalism, which both Israel and the United States do. And so I just want to call out the hypocrisy of the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives. And I'm disappointed that what's holding this bill up is not a meaningful debate about where do we fall as a nation on the issue of what's going on in Israel and in Gaza. But the reason this bill is being held up because a bunch of white landowning men from the Republican Party are like, no, our real enemy is people of color who are not documented trying to immigrate into this nation. And that's what's holding it up. It's like, let's get more racist and white supremacist stuff in this bill, not less of it. And that's what's disappointing. And we're not having a meaningful debate about what's going on and what we're supporting. And we're hypocrites who thinks we can have our cake and eat it too. And we can't. We have to choose a side, and we have to oppose what's right, or we have to support what's right and oppose what's wrong. And in this ongoing war in Israel, there is very clear now that it's several months in which side is in the wrong as they continue to bombard Palestinians and the people of Gaza. It is becoming every day increasingly clear which side is in, no matter how this started, right? And I'm not saying this started justly by any stretch of the imagination. But the longer it goes on and the more devastation it wreaks upon the Palestinian people, the more it becomes clear which side is in the wrong. And there are millions and millions of victims here that we need to begin to stand up for. And we're too afraid to do it. We're too afraid as a nation to do it. And that's disappointing. So, again, I don't know how to change the national debate about this. I don't want to just call people names and yell and scream, but I do want to point out the hypocrisy. And again, this comes down to our personal dialogue. Let's start, if I can't stand in the halls of power and make this debate, let's at least have the debate here and say, yeah, we need to acknowledge what we're doing. And we need to be able to say what's right and what's wrong. And we need to acknowledge that we as a nation have set a horrible example for Israel and the rest of our allies. Because what Israel is doing is absolutely what we do anytime we feel threatened as a nation. It's what we do. So we have very little integrity to say anything to Israel because this is what we do. And so the debate isn't just about we need to call out Israel. We need to call out ourselves as a nation. We need to stop acting this way. But that's the challenge. That's the challenge is Israel is just doing what we do. What we've done, what we continue to do every time we feel threatened. And that is what is the most shameful about this. Is we have no integrity to say anything to Israel. We don't. We have no integrity to say anything to Israel. Because this is what we did to Muslims and people throughout Muslim nations throughout the Middle East for the past 20 years since 9/11. And that's what's truly lamentable, my relatives. And that's where I want to encourage us to find better ways to talk about this rather than screaming at each other. We have to find a way to talk more deeply about these things and to recognize that even us standing here, right, we are still a part of this nation. These wars, whether we agree with them or not, are being fought on our behalf. And we need to continue working to find a way to change the dialogue at the national level and to get our nation to wrestle with and to deal with who we are and how we got where we are. All of this, of course, boils back to creating common memory and trying to build a nation where we, the people, actually means all the people, and to being much better and more responsible global citizens, none of which we've done very well in the past. So we have a lot of work to do, my relatives. There's a lot we have to continue working on. I also want to talk on a bit of a lighter note, if I may. Native News Online frequently puts out just a calendar of events of what's going on around Indian country. And I'm sharing the link with you here because I was reading through it and I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about what's going on. But yeah, if you look at this calendar, there are powwows in Michigan, Florida, and California. There's indigenous markets in Oklahoma and Oregon. There's native history presentations in Florida and Pennsylvania. We have indigenous storytellers, writers, and other artists in places like Nevada, New York, and Minnesota. And these are just events that are happening around Indian country over this next week. And so I shared the link with you. It's in Native News Online. And I welcome you to look at the events anything going on in your area and just what's happening within Indian country as we're coming out of winter and slowly moving into spring. We'll be having more things going on throughout Indian country, and I encourage you to take advantage of things going on in your area. I also want to talk very briefly. Of course, it's the Super Bowl. And we had the Super Bowl the other day, right? And for those of you who watch are big football fans, I'm not a huge NFL football fan. I'm a UCLA fan, so I like UCLA football. I like UCLA basketball. The UCLA Bruins are actually doing very well right now. They've won 7 of their last 8 games, I think. They're getting close to getting on the bubble for the tournament. But yeah, they've actually done a really good job. And if you follow UCLA basketball, right, Nick Cronin, who is our coach, I'm very impressed with the job he's done this year. We have the second youngest team in the major conferences nationally, and our season started out very, very rocky, but it has consistently been getting better these past few weeks and months, and it's fun to watch. But the Super Bowl was last weekend, which is the biggest media event of the year. And of course, there was the huge screaming match between the MAGA Republicans and the rest of the world about Taylor Swift and her support for the Kansas City Chiefs. And the game was actually a good game. If you watch the game, I caught the end of it. I watched maybe the first 15 minutes, and then we did some stuff as a family, and then my wife and I came back and watched the second half of the fourth quarter as well as the overtime. And it was a good game, right? It was fun to watch. Usually these games are pretty boring, and it was a fun game to watch. I didn't really care who won. It would have been fun to see San Francisco win. The fact that Kansas City has the possibility of building a little dynasty here was good to see. But it was a fun game to watch. But my highlight of the game, I'm going to share this with you. Right. So everyone's asking about, did you see the advertisements? Did you watch these games? Well, there's also a lot of really good food eaten around the Super Bowl. And that night for dinner for my family, we made homemade nachos. I fried chips. We cooked up some beef and some chicken and made some homemade cheese sauce. And anyway, so I want to just show you my nacho plate right there. So this was my nacho plate that we used that I ate when we watched the Super Bowl. And it was pretty good. That's all I have to say. It was a very, very good plate of nachos. So yeah, that was a good game to watch, but it was even better because we had some really good food and got to hang out as a family for a little bit. But I also just want to go over and I don't want to forget about this, right? Because obviously we still need to discuss the fact that Kansas City does not have a very good mascot and name, and they still do a lot of things that are not only racially insensitive, but are just racist. And we cannot forget that debate that's going on there. And so I'm going to, again, share an article written by my friend Levi Rickert at Native News Online. He actually wrote this for the Super Bowl last year in 2023, but he republished it again this year. We have to have a discussion. We have to change the name of the Chiefs, right? We have to get rid of some of their cheers and their chop and the other things that they do. It's great to see this football team that's playing well and doing good, but we need to recognize that we need to get rid of some of these mascots and some of the things we do in our sports. And just because the Washington football team changed their name, that doesn't mean the problem's over. This is an ongoing problem that we have not even begun to solve or to end yet. So I wanted to share that with you. But so anyway, my relatives, I hope you have a good day. This was a good chance to share a good cup of coffee with you, talk about a few things going on in our world. I hope the conversation we're having here is helpful. Again, I think as I'm thinking about these problems, and I've been actually pondering this for the past several weeks about, on one hand, I don't want to ever stop working for change, and I don't want to ever stop trying to impact and be a part of the national dialogue. But I also want to recognize that I not only want to impact the national dialogue, but I want to use the platform that I have to encourage people to make better individual choices and to change things in our own environments, in our own worlds, whether that's changing how we use plastics or how we talk about football teams or just things like that, even how we have discussions about conflict. And again, all these things, we need to have integrity in the way we approach them individually, while at the same time we work to try to impact and change the national dialogue. And so I hope that we can kind of begin to shift that paradigm a little bit. But it's always good to talk with you. Let me look through my comments and see who's here. Miss Harmony 0913. Looks like you were looking at the nachos I had there. Looks yummy. They were very delicious. That beef you saw on that nacho plate. That was some of the farmers market beef that I bought that day, and so that was our beef for the week. And so that was a very good use of that, was to make those nachos with that. But so thanks, Miss Harmony 0913. It's great to have you on here. Who else has jumped in here? George, thank you for being here and for joining the conversation. I appreciate everyone who's a part of this. Please feel free to share my podcast with people, comment on it, like it, do whatever you can to help me promote this. I want to make sure that we do continue to impact the conversation going on. My relatives, walk in beauty, and may we all learn how to walk in beauty together. Ashahat and Hakonet.